economics students. Today we're going to start one of probably our most important unit of the entire semester. That's our unit on the economic model that is called supply and demand. And today we're going to focus on just one half of that model, and that's the demand side of that model. But the supply and demand model is another one of those economic models that is used to predict the economic behavior of individuals or the economic behavior of large organizations or social institutions such as a country or a large business enterprise, a corporation. So we can look at demand from both a macroeconomic level, looking at the demand of a large country, for example, or we can look at it from a microeconomic level when we're talking about just an individual's demand. So let's get started by looking at this picture. I wondered if you could guess where this photograph was taken. There are some clues. First of all, I'll give you the clue that the picture was taken around 1992 or 93. It is not in the United States, so if you look at this and look at how these people are dressed, you may have figured out that this picture was taken in Russia. And it was taken on the occasion of the opening of the very first McDonald's in Moscow, in all of Russia actually, back in about 1992 or 93. And the demand for McDonald's hamburgers was huge. These Russians had heard about McDonald's, but they had never experienced this Western institution called McDonald's, and they were very curious, and so hundreds lined up to get their McDonald's hamburgers in the first week that it was open. In fact, it was thousands lined up to get a McDonald's hamburger. So there was a huge demand for McDonald's in Russia in the 1990s. So let's go ahead then and look at the details on demand by getting started with some definitions. The definition of demand is the quantity of a particular good or service that consumers are willing to buy at different prices at a specific time. A couple of important things in this definition. First of all, that consumers are willing, and I should probably add able to buy. Okay, they have to want the product and be able to get it at different prices, and it's at a specific time. Demand is a snapshot in time. Think of it as think of a line, a geometric line. Demand would be a point on that line, a specific time, a specific point of time is demand. That means then that demand changes. The demand for a McDonald's hamburger today in Russia would be different than the demand for a McDonald's hamburger in 1992. So demand is constantly changing. So when we're talking about demand, we're talking about the quantity that people are willing and able to buy at a specific moment in time. The law of demand is this. There is an inverse relationship between the quantity demanded and the price of a product. That word inverse, what does that mean? You could also use the word opposite. So if there's an inverse or opposite relationship, that means that if the price of a product goes up, the quantity demanded will go down. If the price of a product goes down, the quantity demanded will go up. That's the inverse relationship. So, demand changes. What impacts demand? What would cause demand to change? So there are about 5 factors that we're going to focus on in the rest of this presentation. The first thing that impacts demand is something called the income effect. The higher a person's income, the more spending that person does. So that means that the demand for goods will increase as incomes increase. Conversely, the demand for goods would decrease if incomes decrease. So let's say that the economy is very, very healthy. People are making more money, then the macroeconomic demand for goods and services within that healthy economy will go up. People will get more money and they'll want to spend it. So a healthy economy, higher incomes, demand for goods and services goes up. On the other hand, if we go into a recession is a time when people lose their jobs, you have higher unemployment, incomes go down. In that situation, with incomes going down, the demand for goods and services within the economy would also decrease, go down. That's the income effect. There's also something very close to the income effect called buying power. The quantity of goods that a person can buy with a given amount of money. That's the buying power. So let's assume now, and to illustrate this, that your income stays the same. There's no change in your income. But look what happens to the price of gasoline. Gasoline goes from $2.69 per gallon for regular up to $5.49 per gallon for regular. That means that your buying power has decreased. If your income stayed the same, you can no longer buy as much. So if your buying power goes down, the demand for goods and services will also go down. If your buying power should go up, then that would mean that your demand for goods and services would also go up. In the situation I have here with the change in prices, let's say that your income didn't stay the same, but it basically doubled or slightly more than doubled. Then your buying power would have stayed the same and your demand for gasoline and other goods and services would have remained unchanged. But if your income stayed the same, you can see how your buying power would have significantly been reduced with this kind of change in gas prices. The next one up is diminishing marginal utility, the point when an additional unit of a product consumed is less satisfying than the one before. I've used to illustrate this kind of relationship in the past already this semester, the idea of a candy bar. I'm a big fan of Baby Ruth bars. So if I buy a Baby Ruth bar and I eat that first Baby Ruth bar, I'm going to really enjoy it. I love Baby Ruth bars. So if I get a second Baby Ruth bar because I really enjoyed the first and I start eating that second one, will I enjoy the second one as much as the first? Probably not. And if I should get a third one, would I enjoy the third one as much as the second or the first? Almost certainly not. Okay, the diminishing marginal utility the marginal utility goes down. It's diminishing the more of the product that I eat. Utility, that word basically refers to the pleasure or satisfaction that one gets from a good or a service. It goes down the more of that good or service you consume. Here's another example. Back when we went from the New Year's of 2000, we went from 1999 to 2000, my wife and I went to a very fancy ski resort in Colorado, and this is the restaurant at that resort. Delicious, delicious food, very rich, very gourmet. It was a lovely resort. We had a great time. The meals looked something like this. In fact, I believe this is one of my meals. I ordered the lamb chops, very delicious, very rich, very good. My wife got something like stuffed pheasant or something, equally good, equally rich, gourmet dinners for sure. And we had that and loved it. Go back to the restaurant day 2. Guess what? We had another gourmet meal. It was also delicious, but it didn't quite satisfy us as much as the first day. And by the third day, we really didn't want a gourmet meal anymore. And on either the third or the fourth day that we were at that resort, we actually hired a taxi cab to take us 15 miles into the nearest town because we did not want another gourmet meal. What we really wanted was something like this. And we paid a significant amount of money to get that 15-mile cab ride to the resort and back just so we could get a hamburger rather than another gourmet meal. The diminishing marginal utility of that meal made us no longer want it. Next up is something called substitutes. Now I've got a picture here of a bunch of bottled water and some tap water. You could say that bottled water is a substitute for drinking tap water, or vice versa. If the price, let's say you're a bottled water drinker, and the price of all your bottled waters starts to go up significantly, eventually you might choose to go to the substitute good, which would be tap water. And you'll start drinking more tap water if bottled water prices go up too much. When I was a kid, and if you wanted bottled water, there was one choice, and it was a little green bottle called Perrier water. I'm not even sure if they sell Perrier anymore in the United States, but I can guarantee you that when they started introducing more bottled waters into the United States, that meant that there were substitute bottled water products for Perrier, and people would have started buying more of those substitute goods. And with the availability of substitute goods, the demand for the Perrier water would have gone down. So a substitute is a good or a service that can be replaced by another good or a service. If you have substitute goods and the price of your good should go up, then you can bet that the demand for your good will go down significantly because people will buy the substitute. On the other hand, if the price of the substitute goods should change and go up, then the demand for your product would likely go up, because fewer people would be buying the substitutes because of the higher price, and they'll start buying your product instead. So the availability and price of substitutes is another thing that can affect demand. Can you think of any others? There are other substitutes. You know, think Chevrolet and Ford. That would be an example. McDonald's versus Taco Bell. They're not the same product, but they basically are substitute goods. The good that is being sold, of course, is not necessarily hamburgers or tacos, but a quick, inexpensive meal. So if the price of the Big Mac meal should go up, then the demand for the Big Mac meal will go down, and people instead will start buying tacos, perhaps at Taco Bell, and the demand for tacos would go up. Here's another substitute good that you may not have thought about. This is a sperm whale. People used to go hunting for sperm whales in the 17 and 1800s. Now, why did they hunt sperm whales? They hunted them for the blubber, and that big snout on the sperm whale was full of blubber, blubber being fat. Why did they hunt the whale for fat? Well, the whale oil, the blubber would be boiled and burned down, liquefied into oil. So people would buy the whale oil to illuminate their lamps back in the 1800s. And here's the price of whale oil. Notice how it goes up from the 1830s to the 1850s. That means that there's an increasing amount of whale oil that's being demanded. But look what happens then in the 1860s. The price of the whale oil starts to go down. Why is that? The reason is because there was a substitute that came into the market. Now, you may be thinking that that substitute was electricity, but that's actually not the case. In the 1860s, commercially available kerosene came into the market, and it was kerosene which caused people to switch over and stop using whale oil. Kerosene, by the way, burns much more cleanly. It doesn't smell like whale oil smelled. It was just a much more efficient fuel. But look what happens to the price of kerosene in the 1880s. It just collapses to less than 6 cents by the late 1890s. And why? The reason why in this case was because a new substitute came on market, and that was electricity. So as you get these substitute goods, the price goes down because the quantity demanded went down for the original product, and people moved to the substitute good. Okay, last thing I want to talk about then is complementary goods. Complementary goods are goods that are often purchased with another good. So for example, if you like bacon, you go to the store and buy bacon, there's really a good chance that you're going to buy another good to go along with the bacon, a complementary good. And the complementary good to bacon would likely be eggs. Is there a complementary good to hamburgers? I would say likely so. Oftentimes people will buy a hamburger and French fries or soda. Complementary good for skis. There's a couple. You might think ski boots or ski poles, and yes, those would be complementary goods, although you oftentimes buy them together at the same time you buy the skis. A complementary good, a different complementary good for skis would be ski lift passes. If people are starting to buy a bunch of skis, you can guarantee that more people will start buying the lift passes because they want to use those skis on the slopes. So those are complementary goods. And with a complementary good, if the demand for one goes up, the demand for the complement will also go up. If the demand for one product goes down, the demand for the other will go down. So let's think about this. Let's say that the price of bacon goes up. Well, the price of eggs may not change, but because fewer people will buy bacon because of the price of bacon going up, you can pretty much guarantee that fewer people will buy eggs because of that complementary relationship with bacon. So when you're thinking complementary goods, if the demand for one of the items changes, the demand for the other will change in the same way. That's different than with substitute goods. With substitute goods, if the demand for one of the items changes, the demand for the other item will change in the opposite direction. The substitute would get more demand if the demand for the other goes down. But with complementary goods, it's the same relationship. The demand for one changes, the demand for the other will change in the same way. And with that, we're going to stop this presentation. Be sure that you check Canvas to see if there's an assignment, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day today. We'll talk to you later.